Hi guys, let's talk about reading books with our kids. So the first thing to think about when we're reading books with our kids is, of course, what book are we going to read? When you're selecting a book, it's really important to make sure you kind of have an idea of what you're looking for. If you have an end goal, then make sure that book kind of meets that end goal. If you're trying to teach about regions, and so you want to find a book within that region. If you're trying to teach about a social emotional situation, then find a book that addresses that social emotional situation. Now, it doesn't have to be like, if you've got a kid that's angry, you don't have to go find the book that says Johnny gets angry, but find something that he can relate to, that all of the kids can relate to. Things to kind of stay away from are books that are those kind of informative books that aren't really a story, but it's a picture and a blurb and a picture and a blurb, almost like a magazine or like an encyclopedia. There is definitely a place for that kind of book, but in a large group setting, particularly in a video conferencing setting, it is not an appropriate choice. You will not keep the kids' attention the way that you want to. So that's another reason it's really important when you pick out your book that you read it ahead of time. Always read it before you've taken it to the kids, before you read it with the kids. And the reason for that is you might come across some language that you have to explain later, like specific words that maybe they're not going to be familiar with. So you're thinking about those things like vocabulary. You think about regions and regional sayings, and things might sound different if, we're talking about someone in say England, and they would say that they're going to go to their flat, meaning they're going to go home. We may not know here that that's what that means. So reading the book ahead of time is super helpful, so you can answer those questions as you go along. It also helps you to know, where do you want to ask questions? Where do you want to stop and think? So when you get your book, one of the first things you want to look for is it an appealing book? Does it look appealing? Is it aesthetically pleasing? This book, Raven, is, as you can see, very colorful. Now, this book is actually a legend, or a folktale, if you will, about how the sun was placed in the sky. I actually happen to like this book. If you ever come to my library, you would see in my house that I have books from Africa. I have books from different tribes, Native American tribes, from South American tribes. I'm really into this, and so this book for me is super exciting to share with the kids, and therefore it's going to come across better with the kids too. So that's also helpful to when you find a book. If you love it, it's going to help the kids love it too. If you don't love the book, I don't care how good the book is, it's going to fall flat. So let me show you an example of that. And let's just say I really don't want to read Raven, guys. I don't really like this book, but it seems like a good idea. So that's the attitude I'm going to read this book with right now. All right, guys, we're going to read Raven. This I guess it's a folk tale or something. Raven. Okay. Raven came. All the world was in darkness. The sky above was in darkness. The waters below were in darkness. Men and women lived in the dark and the cold. Raven was sad for them. He said, I will search for the light. Anybody want to keep going, or are we already bored out of our minds? I'm done with this book already, and I only read one page. We need to be excited about this book. We want to be energetic about this book. Now, sometimes books are sad, and so no, we're not going to be jumping up and down in our chair, reading a sad book. That's okay, but we still want to have some animation to it. We still want to think about how we're coming across. We want to have the voices that are appropriate, thinking about what the characters might say and how they might sound. So we're going to do this again, only this time it's going to be me introducing this book with it, being excited about this book. You guys, look, I found this book. It's called Raven, and it's about I'm sorry, guys, it's a tale. It's like a folk tale from the Pacific Northwest, which is kind of like, Oregon, Washington, that area. So this is a very old story about how the sun got put into the sky. It's a pretty cool story. Let's read it. All right. Raven came. All the world was in darkness. The sky above was in darkness. The waters below were in darkness. Men and women lived in the cold and the dark. Raven was sad for them. He said, I will search for the light. Oh, well, that's nice. He wants to help people out. Let's see what he's going to do. Raven flew across the valleys, across mountains. He flew along rivers and over lakes. There was darkness all around. Would you guys be scared if you're just flying in the darkness trying to find light? There's nothing. There's nowhere to go. You don't know what's out there. How would you feel about this? Do you see how I'm stopping and pausing? Now, if I didn't already know that I wanted to pause here, I could always get a Post-it note and just put something right here. Post-it note, ask how you would feel. Something like that. It gives us a chance to get the kids talking to us, and we don't forget that we want to ask that question. But if you can tell, I was really trying to be more excited about this book. I didn't have to jump up and down, but I did have a positive attitude and a positive affect about this book. If you continue into this book, it's actually a beautiful book. The pictures are wonderful, and that's something you want to look for when you're looking for a book is, like I said, that aesthetically pleasing. And so you can see there's lots of colors, there's warmth to it. And so that's the sort of thing we're looking for. We want to talk about, so, here you can see the sadness. You could say something about that. Or if this child were speaking, it says here, the young woman placed the box in front of the Raven child, but he continued to cry. She took the lid off the other bucket. So you can kind of act out those emotions, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with bringing those out for the kids to see those emotions and feel this book a little more viscerally. So that's one example of a book that you could read with your kids. The thing is here, too, to remember, I know some of your kids are going to be older, but there's no reason why you can't read a picture book to a 5th grader. It's about how you read it to them. It's about the attitude, like I said, you have. So this book, this folktale about the sun, you can go deeper even within the book. You can start talking to the kids about what do they know, what do they not know. So don't worry too much about age limits. There's no hard and fast rule that says, if your kids are in 3rd grade, you have to read 3rd grade books. That's simply not true. Another example of a book would be this aesthetically pleasing, but it's not colorful, is Make Way for Ducklings. Now, Make Way for Ducklings, interestingly enough, as you can see here, the pictures are actually quite beautiful. They're hand-drawn. So this also brings up another point. Since we're doing this via a teleconference or a video conference, we want to kind of think ahead. Again, how are we going to hold this book? How are we going to read this book? Are there pictures in here that we need to get close up and take a moment and stop and get them right up there so that the kids can see the ducklings? Or is it okay to read it back here the whole time? So whatever is going to work for you guys, works for you guys. There's no right or wrong answer here. The idea is just to make sure that the kids are able to see and interact. Now, the interesting thing about Make Way for Ducklings is it's not technically a nonfiction, but it's kind of a nonfiction. And what I mean by that is this was actually based on a true story. The situation with the ducklings did happen. However, we know that it's not entirely true because in this book, the ducks talk. Now, maybe I'm crazy and I just haven't met one yet, but as far as I know, no ducks talk. So clearly this is not 100% nonfiction. But the police officer that is depicted in this story, he really did do what he did in this story, which was save the little ducklings getting across the street. And so this is a great conversation starter for you guys to have with your kids. The other thing to think about with this particular book, it's pretty long. And so you may not be able to get through the whole book. Generally you want to go maybe 20 minutes at the most, depending on your kids' level of interest. If you really feel like they're interested, but they're starting to lose interest, there's nothing wrong with stopping and saying that we're going to finish it tomorrow. But we want to do that in, again, kind of a more exciting, interesting way. So, maybe we would say, okay, I see the kids are getting a little squirrely, or I've planned ahead knowing that this is going to happen. This book is too long, so I've already read through it a few times. I know how long it's going to take, and I know about this page, we're going to run out of time. I'm going to have a marker here for myself to remind me, and when I get to this point, I'm going to stop. So the last sentence here says, "Don't you worry," said Mrs. Mallard. "I know all about bringing up children." Wow, she knows all about bringing up children, you guys. So tomorrow we're going to find out what she is going to do with these ducklings. That's going to be so exciting to see what happens next. So you see, you don't have to finish the book. You can stop and come back to it. You can make a book last for a couple days. There's nothing wrong with that. nothing at all. As long as your kids are interested and you're enjoying yourself and they're enjoying themselves, by all means, keep those books going. Another type of book that you can consider reading with your kids is a book of poetry. Now, this is Shel Silverstein. If you don't know who Shel Silverstein is, you need to go talk to your parents and get a copy of this book, because it's amazing and everybody should know who Shel Silverstein is, at least in my humble opinion. This book is great. It's all poetry, but it has pictures, and they're usually pretty darn silly. And the nice thing about poetry is you don't have to read this whole book by any means. You just can kind of go through it. You have an idea of what you're looking for. Maybe you want to get people's attention. It's a good way to say, hey, guys, I'm going to get out Shel Silverstein, and I'm going to read one of the poems. I want you all sitting down and your microphones on mute before this poem is ready. Ready, set, go. Policeman, help me, please. Somebody went and stole my knees. I chase him down, but I suspect my legs and feet won't connect. It's a few lines. You can still have personality. You can still bring out some voices and be excited about what you're reading. So again, there's no reason why you can't read something like this. The last thing I'm going to leave you to think about before I close this out is, again, talking about ages, and we're talking about appropriate books for different ages. You are absolutely fine with reading some chapter books. Now, your youngest kids may have a harder time following, but it doesn't mean they can't. They won't have pictures, so you are going to kind of become the pictures. You're going to use your voice, you're going to use your body language, and you're going to bring those things out. But chapter books are wonderful. You can read a chapter at a time, or however long, some books, have really long chapters, some have 2-page chapters. So it's going to be up to you how you read a chapter book. There's no reason why you can't. Again, you're going to be looking for the kids to be interested, to be engaged, and to be interactive. Stop lots of times and ask questions. Let them ask you questions. Get their points of view throughout. The beauty of reading a book is the connection that we get when we read out loud. That's why read-alouds are so very important. I can, now that we won't talk about how old I am, but I'm older than the kids, and I still love to sit down and read a book and have somebody even read a book to me. I love to walk into a classroom where there's a storybook being read. I'll be on the floor with those kids in a second, because there's something comforting about that experience and that connection. There's something comforting for our kids to have that book there for us, and they know that you picked that book out for them, that you wanted them to have that experience. Right now, our world is in upheaval. These kids are worried and stressed and don't know what's going to happen next, but they do know they can count on you. And a good book is just another way to build that connection. Thanks, guys, for listening, and I hope you have a great time choosing your next book.